our exports.
President Obama is signing this economic stimulus package in Denver at the Museum of Nature and Science. The site was picked in part because it has 465 solar panels on its roof. You have written, if the United States and Europe can come up with so many trillions of dollars to save their financial institutions within a few months, surely there's money to tackle the climate crisis, which is a far bigger problem involving the world's survival.
Well, you know that we are going to have this big Copenhagen conference in December, and we need to have a global deal in order to globally deal with the climate crisis. But the developing world does not have the money or the technology to be able to switch their economies to a low-carbon society and a low-carbon economy. So the gateway to a global deal, as far as the developing countries are concerned, is to be able to establish a fund within the United Nations Convention on Climate Change, which will be able to fund the technological changes and the economic changes that we have to have in the developing countries. If we are able to find $4 trillion to subsidize banks and motorcar companies in the space of 5 to 6 months, surely we can come up with $100 billion for a start to launch a fund within the United Nations to help the developing countries to tackle climate change. If we do not have such a fund, then we will, I believe we will find it very difficult to have a global deal to deal with climate change, and we are going to face an environmental devastation. So in a way, the economic crisis has been positive in that it has shown us that if there is a political will, the trillions of dollars will be possible. And what greater cause can we devote than to come up with helping the developing countries to deal with climate change and poverty at the same time.
You just heard the Director of Intelligence, Dennis Blair, saying that the economic crisis has become a greater concern than terrorism.
I think he is right, because when people are economically insecure, when they don't have jobs, when they are in poverty, and there is no hope in the system, then of course they will have to turn to whatever means they think they need to do out of sheer frustration and hopelessness. So we need to tackle the problem of jobs and poverty in the developing countries, and unfortunately, with the recession that began in the United States, the economy is going to plunge in the developing world. So we need to rethink the way the global economy is run, and we have to give the freedom to developing countries to have the policy options that they require to rebuild their economies with the help of finance and technology, and with, at the same time, the need to tackle climate change side by side.
Finally, the World Bank's saying the crisis could push 100 million more people into poverty and child mortality rates soaring.
I think this is a gross underestimate. You know, I read in the papers Gordon Brown, the UK Prime Minister's chief economic advisor, Ed Balls, saying last week that this depression is going to be worse than the Great Depression. It'll be the worst depression in more than 100 years, and that the effects are going to last for 15 years. We have already seen 20 million jobs lost in China in the last few months, and this is only the beginning. I know the trade unions are very worried about China, and you have lost 3 million jobs in the United States, but in China they have already lost 20 million jobs because of the loss of exports to the United States and the rest of the world. And this is only China. What about Africa? What about so many other countries? We could have 1 billion more people in the developing world plunging into new poverty because of this crisis.
Martin Khor, I want to thank you for being with us at the Third World Network and the South Center. Our website is democracynow.org. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks so much for joining us.